What's up everyone, Guy here with another Presents. This time I'm focusing on more of a recent film of late, Ready Player One. This film recently came out in theaters at the time of this recording, so I wanted to talk not so much of a review about it, as I've already written a review on that on our Total Geek Live website. However, I want to talk about the various character cameo appearances that make their many appearances throughout this film. For the sake of disclosure, I am going to get into spoilers a little later in this video, as well as I want to be clear that I have not read Ready Player One, the book, as of yet. Now, I've had a lot of friends who have read Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, and they say that the book and the movie are vastly different. A lot of character motivations, challenges, a lot of events. This is not uncommon for a Steven Spielberg film, however. If you've ever read Jurassic Park and The Lost World, what happens to characters and what goes on during the events? Completely different in many respects. Spielberg tends to do his own thing when he adapts the rights to a book. Ready Player One is not a movie where you're going to catch all the references in one viewing. To be honest, I don't even think you could catch all of them in two viewings, even if you had a little bit of foresight by doing some research on who to check out where. It's a really big film with a lot of stuff going on at all times. However, one of the biggest changes that I've heard from book to movie is that while the book was primarily set in the 1980s, Ready Player One, the movie, is set in the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, and 2010s. You can see all sorts of things, everything from Overwatch to Minecraft to, of course, all those 80s staples. Being a Spielberg film, he made a lot of choices. He didn't want to make this a vanity project, so he didn't include a lot of references to his own films. That's not to say that there aren't things, because the T-Rex from Jurassic Park makes an appearance, and films that he produced such as Back to the Future and Gremlins, they do have little tiny well, I say that, but Ready Player One has the DeLorean full front and center in this movie several times. But in terms of seeing a lot of Spielberg references, although I consider him instrumental from so many things, from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, E.T., Raiders of the Lost Ark, Jaws, so on and so forth, you will see a few things, but don't really expect to see a lot of Spielberg's work in here. There have been a handful of films in the past, such as Lego Movie, Wreck-It Ralph, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Although one of the biggest things I did notice about this particular film, for Disney films like Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Wreck-It Ralph, you will see a lot of Warner Brothers properties in there. In Roger Rabbit, you see Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck. In Wreck-It Ralph, you will see a lot of the Midway titles that Warner Brothers acquired in the last few years. However, if you look at films like Lego Movie, and especially Ready Player One, Disney does not play in these films. Star Wars was briefly in the Lego Movie only because Disney hadn't bought the Star Wars property at that point. Yet when you look at Ready Player One, there is absolutely no reference of anything Disney, Marvel, or Star Wars in this film. There's no Tron, there's no Spider-Man, there's one or two tiny references to Star Wars, mostly verbal, although a lot of people have said that you can see an R2-D2 at one of the last scenes of the film, but again, there's so much going on in this film, it's so easy to miss everything, and it's probably going to take people online compiling lists to get all this stuff together, and even then they'll probably miss things, because I've seen a lot of lists already and they're still missing things. One of the funniest things that I saw when I saw it last was Pee Wee Herman's bike from Pee-wee's Big Adventure. It was kind of a little yes for me. But that's the thing about this film. There's a lot of Easter eggs, and eventually they don't, other than oh hey cool or oh hey I remember that, they don't really have as much of a significant role in the plot as you would hope. And I've already seen a little complaining online, oh, my favorite character didn't do this. They would certainly never do that. One of the biggest things to remember that what you see in this movie is not really the characters. It wasn't too different when I was playing Xbox 360. I would sometimes dress up my avatar in a Tron or Ghostbusters outfit for fun. Although, speaking of which, I was pretty bummed out for an 80s-based film. I didn't see anything Ghostbusters in it. Are you serious? Now I'm going to talk about the role of how some of these properties work into the plot. And of course, at this point, I have to get into spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie, hang on, check out this video later. You might agree with me, disagree with me. And I certainly want to hear from people in the sense that I want to see what you saw that I didn't, and vice versa. I'd love to open up a discussion about that. One of the biggest things that I noticed about this film is that other than the oh hey cool moment or a lot of side exposition, a lot of things didn't really play into things. I mean, again, there were a lot of great things that I saw, everything from Freddy Krueger to Jason Voorhees to Battletoads to insert this this and this, and it was probably in there. I saw Hello Kitty at one point. Again, just a little bit of everything, and it was really interesting to me. But a lot of it almost felt like it was meme-worthy. It was kind of that one meme that was going around on Facebook for so long that kind of just jumbled a bunch of properties together. It was cool and funny and interesting on one hand, but it's almost like dropping in conversation that you're sneaking past Megatron as you're making your way through Death Mountain with your proton pack attached. All that stuff is great, and it certainly brings up different levels of nostalgia, and oh, I remember that, and I see what you did there. But very little of it had reference to the plot, and that kind of bothered me. I like having things in movies that actually will be used. And that's not to say that there weren't. There were a couple of really great scenes. In any case, Spielberg's done a lot of blockbusters over the years, and of course his action sequences are always great. There, of course, is the giant race through Delta City from RoboCop, where it's a number of cars, everything from the Mach 5 to the Batmobile to Bigfoot, and they're all racing through to get the first key, the first of 3 keys. And there's a ton of stuff going on, and there's, of course, obstacles that try to, stop them as they're going through everything from the T-Rex from Jurassic Park to King Kong. For me, the nostalgic showcase piece in this film was the second challenge, in which they were trying to find information about James Halliday's one and only date. In this particular challenge, they went into the set of The Shining. That was freaking awesome. And it played really well because it was one of those things where they actually did interact with everything in there. You had the gross naked zombie lady in there, you had the twins, you had the elevator of blood, you had the ballroom to an extent. But everything looked just like the movie. Even Jack Torrance makes an appearance. You know it's him, although they don't show the face, so you don't get to see Jack Nicholson, and you don't get to hear the "Here's Johnny" line from him. I think that was my favorite scene from the entire film, and I absolutely loved that. And there were other great scenes, of course, and I think that was one of the greatest things about this film that just made it fun, was when they really worked together to mash all these things together. One of the best comparisons I can make to Ready Player One is the video game that's sadly discontinued, Lego Dimensions. They just kind of like, okay, you like this stuff, we're going to put it all together. So you'd have Ghostbusters and Beetlejuice and E.T. and Gremlins and Powerpuff Girls all going together on this great adventure inside Scooby-Doo's haunted mansion. And it was awesome. And that's probably the closest comparison I can make to what this film feels like. Because there is one scene that's admittedly really cool. It's this one scene where a Gundam jumps outside of the Serenity spaceship to help the Iron Giant battle Mechagodzilla. If that isn't the most insane scene description that you've ever heard, well, you've got to share with me what's even better than that. And it was exciting to me, and that was an awesome scene. I think the only thing I didn't like, though, is I have such a soft spot for the Iron Giant, and seeing him actually get beat up and hurt and made me really sad. It just kind of upset me, to be honest. They did an interesting little Terminator 2 reference toward the end of that scene, but man, I really like the Iron Giant. It kind of went against his whole, he wanted to be a pacifist and not be a living weapon sort of thing. So it was a little bit of a thing. But again, you have to remember these aren't the characters. They're simply player avatars that are using these skins to live out their great adventure inside the Oasis. So you can't necessarily get mad because they act out of character, because it's not them. I think for me, one of the most resonant scenes in this entire film was the third challenge, because in Halliday's challenge, you had to go decipher all these clues and ultimately find this giant golden Easter egg. Very reminiscent of the whole Willy Wonka, I've hidden the wonderful prize, and you get the keys to the kingdom if you get it. And to me, the golden Easter egg, the way they referenced it and the way they put it as a challenge was actually, I'd have to use the word touching, because I grew up in the Atari age as well. So games like Pitfall, Yars' Revenge, certainly Adventure. One of the other games that I thought might have had a greater role since they started getting into this whole scene with Atari 2600 is the Sword Quest series. It was supposed to be 4 games, but only ended up 3, and 3 is such a weird send-away item anomaly. The average player really doesn't have it outside of emulation and compilation packs. But that was a whole thing where you had to go solve all these clues, and you'd win these ultimate wonderful jewel challenges that disappeared during the great video game crash. See, this is what this type of film does to me. It starts making me pull out all this weird trivia. Anyway, what I was getting into, Adventure was very much one of those types of games as well. Back in the early Atari games, Adventure came out in 1979. Atari wanted to be known as a singular entity, not a collection of programmers and designers and artists and people. It wanted to be known as Atari, not a game by. Warren Robinett wasn't feeling this. And so he did this slightly convoluted series of events that if you picked up a little certain dot in a certain room and went to another certain room and passed through this one line, you would see a simple "created by Warren Robinette" right in the middle of the screen. And the way they described it as just this ultimate Easter egg as a part of being the ultimate Easter egg in film, I don't know, there was just something really beautiful about it in the sense that James Halliday's motivations were also similar. He just wanted to make something special. He wanted to create this incredible world as his own legacy, and I don't know, it got to me as I'm on a geek site. What do you expect from me? Is Ready Player One a strong enough film without all the references? There were a lot of familiar story tropes. I don't feel like it really breaks any new storytelling ground. Not in the sense of does it do anything new. It feels very much like an 80s film. There are a lot of predictable plot beats. They try to make the challenges and the riddles a little complex, but really when they are discovered and solved, they do make sense in retrospect, and it's kind of cool. They did their homework on that. However, sometimes I do feel that those references and cameos do detract from the film because they're talking about a crucial plot point when Sonic the Hedgehog and a Ninja Turtle and Spawn are flopping across the screen, and so you're just like, oh wow, that's cool, and then it's, oh wait, they're talking. So that was one of the biggest distractions for me on that. It's when they made the actual references mean something in context of the story do I feel that the film succeeded, and I feel the film actually made its geeky nostalgia work. I didn't feel Ready Player One was a bad film by any means. I found it distracting at times, which I think that's kind of the point of what it was trying to do, but at the same time, I do think sometimes that worked against it. And I think it's one of those films that I eventually will pick up because I do want to see all of the stuff that they managed to cram in this film. You know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they did cram in some things that I thought they didn't. Maybe there is a Ghostbuster reference in there. Maybe there is some Disney thing. It sounded like the people behind the scenes slid as much stuff as they possibly could into every scene. Maybe they got something past someone's lawyers, I don't know. But in terms of seeing everything, I think it's going to take a lot of research, and I think it's going to take a lot of viewing, and I think it's going to take a lot of getting this on video, pausing the screen, and just slowly going through frame by frame. Anyway, that's my thought on the character appearances in Ready Player One. Feel free to share with me some of your own thoughts and discoveries that you found out through Ready Player One. Do you agree with me that all the excessive cameos were a little distracting, or do you think they were just enough? Do you think they were not enough? Do you wish characters did more things? Do you wish for a sequel that they can do even more? If they do a sequel, and if Spielberg ends up directing the next one, I do hope that he kind of relaxes on his own properties because he's so very much the voice of the 80s. And I think it's a shame, and I get it from the point where he doesn't want to have this viewed as a vanity project where he's just heaping praise upon himself. But it is a period piece set in 2045 that is dearly in love with the 1980s. Spielberg's role in the 1980s is pretty much inescapable. And to be honest, if they ever do a Ready Player 2, I hope that Disney by that time learns how to play nice and will actually share some of its own properties. I wouldn't mind seeing the Avengers. I wouldn't mind seeing Pirates of the Caribbean or Mickey Mouse or Darth Vader. I'm sure there would be a ton of Darth Vaders and Boba Fett's in a world like this, and just not seeing it because Disney will grant you an appearance in their films, but they're not going to have anything to do with your film. I think that's disrespectful to the studios. I mean, I guess they're planning to buy those studios all down the line anyway. That's just Disney, but there are certain things about modern Disney that doesn't really fly with me, and instances like that just don't sit well with me. But anyway, I'm always doing videos that reference certain properties or companies or characters or films or what have you that always have a certain influence on me. So I will see you that next time, and until then, take care.